Emily had never known silence to be so heavy. After Michael passed away, the house seemed like a stranger to her. The ticking clock in the hallway echoed through empty rooms, and every small sound reminded her of what was missing. She walked into the kitchen each morning and glanced at the chair by the window, Michael's chair, where he always sipped his coffee while reading the news. Now it sat untouched, almost sacred, and its emptiness pulled at her heart. Her son. Daniel tried to make life feel normal again. At 23, he was young but mature, carrying his own grief while worrying about hers. He worked during the day and spent evenings with her, making sure she wasn't alone. Emily appreciated his care, but she often caught the sadness in his eyes. They were both hurting, yet both pretending to be strong for the other. One evening in late autumn, they sat together at the dinner table. The air smelled faintly of roasted chicken, but the meal felt tasteless. Emily set her fork down, realizing she hadn't eaten much. Daniel noticed. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but serious. "Mom," he said, "do you ever feel like Dad is still here? Watching us somehow?" The question caught her off guard. She lifted her gaze to him, searching his face for what he truly meant. His brown eyes, so much like his father's, were filled with honesty. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him yes, that she felt Michael's presence in every room, in every memory. She wanted to comfort him, to ease his pain, but her lips froze. Words failed her. That night, lying in bed, Emily stared at the ceiling. Daniel's question replayed in her mind. She remembered the way Michael used to laugh, the warmth of his hand when he reached across the table, the steady sound of his footsteps moving through the hallway. Was it possible that some part of him lingered, watching over them? Or was it just the longing of their hearts that created the illusion? The wind rattled the branches outside the bedroom window. Emily closed her eyes and let the sound carry her back to the last evening she had spent with Michael. They had sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn gold and violet. He had squeezed her hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll keep living. Emily, promise me you'll find light again, even when I'm gone." She had nodded through tears, never imagining how soon those words would matter. The following morning, Emily moved through her usual routine, making coffee, tidying the house, checking her garden. Yet everywhere she went, she felt the weight of Daniel's question. When she passed the living room, she paused. A family photo sat on the mantel, showing the three of them smiling at a beach years ago. Michael's arm was wrapped around her shoulders, his grin full of life. Daniel was only 12 back then, standing tall and proud beside them. Emily reached out and brushed dust from the frame, her eyes stinging with tears. Later that day, Daniel came home from work. He set his bag down and walked into the kitchen. "You okay, Mom?" he asked softly. Emily forced a smile. "I'm fine," she answered, though her heart was not. They ate dinner together again that evening, this time in quieter company. Daniel glanced toward the empty chair by the window. His shoulders stiffened, and he turned back quickly, but Emily noticed. That chair had become a symbol, a reminder of the man they both loved and missed as the night grew late. Emily stood by her bedroom window, looking out at the quiet street. A single lamp lit the sidewalk, casting a pale glow on the pavement. She thought about her son, about the grief they carried, and about the strange question he had asked. Did he truly feel his father's presence? Was he searching for hope, or was he afraid of forgetting? Emily touched the locket around her neck, the one Michael had given her on their anniversary years ago. Inside was a tiny picture of them together, smiling in younger days. She whispered into the stillness, "Michael, if you are watching us, give me the strength to guide our son." The house remained quiet. But in her heart, she felt a flicker of warmth, as if the memory of love itself was enough to keep her moving. Still, Daniel's question stayed with her, haunting and mysterious. She didn't know how to answer him. She didn't know if she wanted to. What she did know was that grief had changed them both, and life would never be the same. Something inside her told her that Daniel's words were only the beginning, and that soon he would say something even more difficult. Something that would force her to confront feelings she had carefully locked away, and as she drifted into restless sleep that night, Emily couldn't shake the sense that her son was carrying a truth she wasn't ready to. Here, Emily tried to fill her days with tasks that distracted her from the ache inside. She joined a book club at the library, where she spent her afternoons helping with community events. She baked pies for neighbors, planted flowers in her garden, forced herself to smile when people asked how she was doing. On the outside, she looked composed. But when night came and the house grew quiet, her loneliness always returned. She missed the sound of Michael's voice, the way he hummed while fixing things, the warmth of his hand reaching for hers. Daniel noticed her silence more than she realized. He was careful with his words, often checking on her with a gentle, "You okay, Mom?" She always nodded, even when her chest felt heavy. He didn't press, but his eyes showed he wasn't convinced. He carried his grief differently, throwing himself into work and staying strong for her. But Emily knew her son well enough to see the weight on his shoulders. One Sunday morning, the air was crisp with the first hint of winter. Emily was in the garden, watering her roses. The flowers were fading with the season, but she still cared for them tenderly. She leaned down, brushing a petal, when Daniel's footsteps approached behind her. His voice was hesitant, almost fragile. "Mom, can I ask you something?" She straightened, turning toward him with a curious smile. Of course Daniel shifted, his hands buried in his pockets. He took a breath and said, "Do you ever think about falling in love again?" The question hit Emily like a sudden wind. The watering can slipped slightly in her grip, spilling onto the soil. She blinked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "What did you say?" Daniel looked at her with seriousness she couldn't ignore. "I mean, do you ever think about being with someone again? Not to forget Dad, but to be happy?" Emily froze. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had expected him to ask about work, about dinner, maybe even about memories of his father. But not this. The thought of love after Michael had been one she avoided, almost as if entertaining it would betray his memory. She searched for words but found none. Instead, she whispered, "Why would you ask me that?" Daniel lowered his gaze, kicking lightly at the dirt. "Because I can see you're lonely, and I don't want you to be." His voice trembled, filled with an honesty that startled her. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to dismiss it, to change the subject, but the truth in his words unsettled her. She had been lonely, unbearably so, though she never admitted it. At night, she sometimes wished for a voice to fill the silence, someone to share simple conversations with, for laughter to return to her life. Yet the idea of love again felt impossible. Her loyalty to Michael, the man she had built her life with, kept her heart locked. That evening, Emily cooked dinner, but could barely taste the food. Daniel's question echoed in her mind. After the dishes were cleared, she retreated to her room and opened the old wooden box on her dresser. Inside were letters Michael had written to her over the years, anniversary notes, birthday cards, small reminders of love. She read one of them, where he had written, "No matter what happens, promise me you'll keep your heart open to life. You deserve joy, even if I can't be there to give it." Tears blurred her vision. Could it be that even Michael had known, deep down, that she might face this choice one day? She pressed the letter to her chest, struggling with guilt and longing. The following days moved quickly. Emily busied herself at the library, sorting books with Mrs. Jenkins, the kind older woman who always insisted she try a new novel. One afternoon, Mr. Carter, a man she had met through the library group, stopped by to help with a community event. He was gentle, patient, and had recently lost his wife. They spoke briefly about books and gardening, and though it was simple conversation, Emily found herself smiling in a way she hadn't in months. Later that evening, Daniel noticed the faint light in her expression. He didn't mention it, but she saw the way he looked at her, almost knowingly. She avoided his eyes, ashamed of how much a small smile had lifted her spirit as the week ended. Emily sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames. She thought of Michael, of their years together, of the home they built. She thought of Daniel's question, of his brave honesty, and she thought of the way her heart had stirred slightly at a conversation she never expected to matter. She whispered into the quiet room, "Michael, am I allowed to feel this? Am I allowed to live again?" The flames crackled, offering no answer, but deep inside. She sensed that this question, the one Daniel had dared to ask, was the beginning of something she could no longer ignore. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against Emily's chest. She brewed coffee, set 2 mugs on the table out of habit, then quickly put one back in the cupboard. That simple act reminded her once again that Michael was gone. Daniel joined her at the table, his face serious, as though something weighed heavily on his mind. He ate slowly, barely tasting his food. Emily noticed but didn't press him. She knew her son well. When he was ready, he would speak later that day. While folding laundry in the living room, she heard him walk in. He stood for a moment, hands deep in his pockets, before finally saying, "Mom, I need to tell you something." His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed hesitation. Emily set the folded shirt aside, giving him her full attention. "Go on," she encouraged gently. Daniel sat down across from her, his shoulders tense. "It's about what I asked you in the garden," he began. Emily felt her heart quicken. She braced herself, unsure where this was going. Daniel continued, "I asked because I saw something. I saw you smiling last week at the library. You were talking to Mr. Carter." Emily blinked, startled. Heat rushed to her face. "You saw that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded. "I haven't seen you smile like that since Dad passed. And it made me think maybe it wouldn't be so bad if you felt that again. With someone. Even if it's not Dad." The word struck her harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to respond right away. The thought of her son noticing something she hadn't even admitted to herself was overwhelming. She had smiled with Mr. Carter, yes, but it had been innocent, just a kind exchange between 2 people who shared loss. Yet Daniel's eyes told her he had seen more. Her heart thudded. "Daniel, are you saying you'd be all right if I found love again?" The question felt fragile, like glass in her mouth. Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm but tender. "Mom, I want you to be happy. I know how much you love Dad. I loved him too. But I don't think he'd want us to live in sadness forever. He'd want you to keep living, to find reasons to laugh again." His words trembled. The conviction behind them was real. Emily pressed her hand against her chest. Memories of Michael flooded her mind, his laughter, his warmth, his steady presence. She thought of their last evening together when he had whispered that she should keep living even after he was gone. Those words now echoed in her heart louder than ever. Still, guilt clawed at her. She whispered, "But what if it feels like betraying him? What if moving on means forgetting him?" Daniel shook his head. "You could never forget him, Mom. Dad is part of us. He always will be. But I don't think love is about replacing someone. It's about carrying them with you while still opening your heart to what comes next." His eyes shone with unshed tears. And in that moment, Emily realized her son was not just grieving, he was guiding her. She sat in silence, overwhelmed. She thought about Mr. Carter, his gentle smile, his patience, the quiet understanding in his eyes when they spoke. She hadn't let herself think of him beyond friendship, but now Daniel's words had unlocked something inside her. Was her son giving her permission to feel again? The weight of the moment hung between them. Emily finally whispered, "You're so young, Daniel, but you speak with such wisdom. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I ever will be." Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to decide now. But I want you to know, I'll support you. Whatever you choose." His hand was warm, grounding her as tears slipped down her cheeks. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's words replaying in her mind. She thought of Michael's promise request, thought of the years they had shared, and thought of the quiet possibility of something new. For the first time since her husband's death, the idea of love did not feel impossible-eyed, felt terrifying, yes, but also alive. The next day, Emily went to the library. She greeted the staff, helped arrange books, and then found herself face to face with Mr. Carter. He smiled kindly, holding a stack of novels. "Good morning, Emily," he said warmly. She returned the smile, though her heart raced. For a brief moment, she remembered Daniel's words, "I saw you smiling." And without meaning to, she smiled again. As she walked away, clutching a book to her chest, Emily knew life was shifting. Daniel had seen something she hadn't dared to acknowledge, and now it couldn't be ignored. Her son's honesty had opened a door. She wasn't sure she was ready to walk through, but she also knew she couldn't close it again. The truth was out, and her heart was listening. Emily whispered quietly to herself, maybe, I can live again. The days after Daniel's confession felt different for Emily. She walked through the house with new awareness, her son's words echoing in her mind. Dad would want you to live fully, not in shadows. It was both comforting and frightening. She had spent months wrapped in grief, afraid to imagine a future without Michael. And now suddenly there was a small window opening, letting in light she didn't know she needed. One evening, as she cooked dinner, Daniel joined her in the kitchen. He chopped vegetables quietly, glancing at her from time to time. Finally he said, "You seem lighter, Mom, like you're breathing easier." Emily gave a faint smile. "Maybe I am. Maybe it's because you gave me permission to think about life differently." Daniel set the knife down, meeting her eyes. "You didn't need my permission. You've always had that choice. But I'm glad if I helped you see it." His words touched her deeply. The next weekend, Emily returned to the library for her volunteer shift. Mr. Carter was there again, arranging books on the shelves. He greeted her with the same gentle warmth. They began talking, first about novels, then about gardening, and eventually about the struggles of loss. His voice was calm, his manner kind, and Emily found herself listening closely, comforted by his presence. When he laughed softly at one of her remarks, she felt something stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It scared her, yet it also filled her with unexpected hope. That night, Emily sat by the window with her tea, staring at the chair that had been Michael's. She still missed him every moment. But the emptiness no longer felt like a wall, it felt like a bridge. She remembered his words from their last evening together. "Promise me you'll find light again." Perhaps this was the beginning of that promise. She whispered softly, "Michael, I will never stop loving you. But maybe it's time to let my heart breathe again." The following week, Daniel noticed the change in her more clearly. She hummed while cooking, smiled more often, and seemed less weighed down by silence. One evening, he asked carefully, "Did you talk to Mr. Carter again?" Emily looked at him with surprise, then gave a shy nod. "Yes, we talked. Just a little." Daniel smiled knowingly. "I'm glad." Emily studied her son for a moment. "It doesn't make you uncomfortable?" she asked. "The idea of me being close to someone else?" Daniel shook his head firmly. "No, Mom. What makes me uncomfortable is seeing you sad all the time. If talking to him brings you peace, then I want that for you." His answer filled her with gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Weeks passed, and Emily continued her quiet routine, but with a lighter spirit. She saw Mr. Carter occasionally at the library or during community events. Their conversations grew easier, natural, never forced. He never pushed her, never made her feel rushed, and that patience gave her space to heal. Slowly, Emily realized she was beginning to enjoy his company, not as a replacement for Michael, but as someone who understood the ache of loss and the courage it took to keep moving forward. One late afternoon, Emily and Daniel sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool. Emily leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. "You know, Daniel," she said softly, "I used to think my story ended the day your father passed. I thought all I had left was memories." She paused, her voice trembling. "But maybe stories don't end like that. Maybe they keep going, even when we're afraid to turn the page." Daniel reached over, holding her hand tightly. "That's exactly what Dad would want for you, to keep turning the pages." His words carried strength, and Emily felt a surge of peace wash over her. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emily stood before the mirror and saw herself differently. Not just as a widow, not just as a mother, but as a woman who had loved deeply and still had love left to give. She realized life wasn't about replacing the past, it was about carrying it forward while still making space for the future. The next day, Emily walked into the library with steady steps. She saw Mr. Carter shelving books in the corner. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world grew quiet around them. He smiled gently, and she smiled back. Not out of politeness, but out of genuine warmth. It was the kind of smile Daniel had noticed, the kind of smile she thought she had lost forever as she returned home that evening. Emily looked once more at Michael's chair by the window. For the first time, she didn't feel only sorrow when she saw it. She felt gratitude for the love she had shared, for the son who had given her courage, and for the future that might still hold beauty. She touched the back of the chair softly, whispering, "Thank you, Michael. For everything, for loving me, for giving me Daniel, for teaching me how to live even without you." Her voice was steady, no longer broken. Then she turned toward the kitchen, where,